During the Holocaust, 6 million Jews and 5 million others, a number impossible to imagine, from all over Europe, been murdered in so short a time. Did anyone oppose the Nazis? Did anyone come to assist the Jews or other victims of the Nazis? Did the Jews try to fight back? Resistance. In many ways, it was near impossible for Jews, and it was also extremely difficult for citizens in the occupied countries. There was little access to weapons, almost no ability to move about freely, and a majority of population that, for various reasons, was interested in resisting the Nazis. Furthermore, open conflict was not a wise alternative, since it most often resulted in death for oneself and others, until it became perfectly clear that the Nazis intend to murder every Jew in Europe. People hung onto the hope that perhaps their own lives would be spared, perhaps being compliant, doing what the Nazis were ordering them to do. They could survive to the end of the war. The Nazis encouraged the sense of hope in order to keep the Jews obedient and orderly. They intentionally deceived the Jews, leading them to believe the relocations and separation of their families were only temporary, and that they were valued workers from the Germany war effort.
The term resistance, when related to Jews and the Holocaust, takes on a different meaning than the way most of us understand the term. Jews during the Holocaust were resisting, among other things, isolation, dehumanization, starvation, illness, and the final solution. Every single Jew living under Nazi tyranny was sentenced to death. For most Jews, acts of cultural and spiritual resistance were the only possible means to oppose Nazi tyranny. Such acts undermined Nazi power and inspired Jewish hope. However, the risk of resisting Nazi policies was grave. Often an act of resistance by one person would mean the death of many others. Resistance of any kind during the Holocaust required great courage. Cultural and spiritual resistance took place within the ghettos, but the extent varied from ghetto to ghetto. Some of the activities were secretive, held at the initiative of underground organizations. They included literary evenings, gatherings to mark the anniversary of a Jewish artist and concerts. Such cultural activities helped people temporarily forget the worries of a ghetto life and were a source of encouragement. However, there was also criticism. Some people argued that these events were inappropriate in a place where so many people were dying every day. On the camp, acts of cultural and spiritual resistance were more difficult, but still occurred. Jews struggled for humanity, for normalcy, and for life by purposefully attempting to keep themselves clean, not showing emotion to their captors, helping others, organizing religious worship, or by fasting on religious holidays despite the fact that they were starving. Others worked below their capabilities and sometimes sabotaged goods they were manufacturing.
There were many crucial differences between Jewish and non-Jewish partisans. Non-Jewish partisans joined the fight either as ultra-nationalists who wanted to rid their countries of all foreigners, or as socialist leftists who wanted to combat fascism. They left their families at home, generally expecting to return to them after the war. The Jewish partisans were not fighting for an ideal such as nationalism or anti-fascism. The Jewish partisans were fighting for their lives. Jewish partisans believed that they would never see their home or family again, especially since the Nazis have already killed most of their families. Furthermore, non-Jewish partisans had support and believed that the patriotic citizens doing their duty for the country, they could usually rely on local farmers to provide them with food and supplies. Not so the Jews. Jewish partisans could rarely rely on the locals who often hated Jews. When thinking about the resistance during the Holocaust, one should not dwell on how little or ineffectual it might appear to have been. Rather, given the circumstances Jews and other targeted groups faced, it was amazing that any act of defiance occurred at all. These acts of resistance demonstrated the resolve of the Jewish people and their allies who triumphed against all the odds. Yet, oftentimes, given the sheer minority of the genocide, these actions were overlooked and or viewed as being the secondary importance. This approach not only trivializes the historic record, but also dishonors the memory of those who perished.